Hey guys, this is Mike Assad and welcome back to the channel. Today I have Dr. Roupen Odabashian to talk about how he got 265 on his step 1. Welcome Roupen to the channel.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to start by asking you about your general preparation. How did you start with step 1 as your first exam? Which year in med school did you start? Did you decide to take your step? So give us from your experience.
Well, that's a bit long story, but like the short version of it is for when I started preparing for my USMLEs. Initially, I was thinking about like writing the USMLE Step 2. And I really studied for the USMLE Step 2 for a while. And then I noticed that I have some deficiencies in basic sciences. And I love basic sciences. Like I love biochemistry, I love physiology, I love embryology. I love to understand why everything happened. So that's when I decided where like I'm just going to start with the step 1. There is no right or wrong decision here. This is important to say. But like I just wanted to start from the basics and build the basic knowledge about how things and why things are like it is, and then move on to the step 2. So after studying for the step 2 during my last years in university, I said like, I'm just going to not write the step 2. I'm just going to move on to do the step 1 first. And that's how like I decided I'm going to do the step 1.
Awesome. So you decided on taking the step 1 in the final year of your school?
Yeah, it was around the final year. It was like around 2015, just before starting like preparing seriously. I felt like I need to start with the step 1, not the step 2.
Awesome, awesome. So now I want to go into the resources you used for preparing each of the step 1 subjects. And we can start with the anatomy, histology, and embryology. What resources did you use to study for these subjects?
So this is really a complicated topic, and it was driving me crazy in the beginning. After writing the step 1 and after going through the step 1, the step 2, I also like wrote the Canadian exams. And after writing like many exams, I came to a conclusion that the resources are similar. Before telling you my resources, all the resources will, like, let's say about like physiology, like you have maybe BRS, you have basic physiology books, you have like Kaplan. And I want to say disclaimer here that I'm not like advertising for to any company, but in general, like there are many resources to study physiology, and they will all give you the basic knowledge about a topic. Like they will all tell you the basic mechanism, what are the changes that happen in congestive heart failure. Some books might mention some extra information that are not mentioned in other books, and vice versa. But when it comes to the exam is not testing how much do you know, is testing what you can do with the basic knowledge that is found in every single book. So when it comes to the knowledge, it's up to you. So I don't want you to be biased. For me, I used initially like Kaplan books, and that helped me to understand the first aid. The first aid, as everyone says, it's the Bible. First, every word, and I repeat, every single word can be an answer to a question in the real exam. But to understand the importance of these words and to be able to memorize first aid, so you need to go through other resources. And whatever resource you like, just use it. You don't need to use the resources that I use. Some people just go to the first aid right away. So it's totally up to you. So to build my knowledge, I use first aid mainly. And I backed up that with Kaplan books to understand the knowledge in first aid, except for pathology. At that time, I was like fascinated by Dr. Goli. I think there was like the book is called Patoma. And yeah, so I used Patoma too, which was like short version, condensed version, but it was really good to understand the pathology in first aid.
Awesome. So you're saying that all these books kind of gives you the basis of understanding for
Yeah,
you to focus on the main ideas which are already in the first aid book.
exactly.
And you use the Kaplan books for the various step 1 subjects except
Exactly.
pathology where you went and studied pathoma.
Exactly. That's correct.
Awesome. And did you use any other books in addition to Kaplan books?
I think like sometimes like when I felt uncomfortable, I would like read the BRS. Um, Sometimes I might go like to longer pathology resources. It depends. If there is a topic and you're not comfortable, just use whatever book you want. Like that's not a problem. But understanding it's something, memorizing knowledge is something else, and using the knowledge, it's third level. It's different thing. So to understand, use whatever book you want. To
Definitely.
memorize, use the first aid. And to use the knowledge, use the question banks.
That's a great advice. That's perfect.
Yeah,
And I know that people get lost or they spend so much time on these uh, amazing but very big books, and it's kind of not realistic to memorize all the information in
for sure.
thousands of pages for one day exam. So I
Yeah,
like your idea that you use this information as a way to help you understand, and then you memorize and understand and use the knowledge available in first aid.
exactly. Yeah.
And what about the Kaplan videos? There are some videos associated with the books. Do you recommend watching these? Did you watch them? What is your recommendation regarding that?
Yeah, so regarding videos, like it depends on your style of learning. Some people might learn from watching videos. Some people might learn from hearing podcasts. Like for me right now, I'm doing my residency and I really enjoy podcasts. Back in med school, I loved watching videos. So that was my learning style. I enjoyed seeing someone on the other end, like interacting with that person, thinking about it, especially like at the end of the day after like reading and memorizing when you are really tired and you need the passive knowledge. So like gaining knowledge is two parts: the active, where you open a book and you try to memorize, and the passive, where you sit behind the computer and you just like listen, try to absorb by osmosis. So like I use videos, yes, I use Kaplan videos, and they were really beneficial for me. Also, I believe like there was doctors in training, the DIT videos. Sometimes I use them. There are also like other companies that whichever you like, use, because like there is no right or wrong answer. It's all about, all these videos will help you to understand, and by understanding you will be able to memorize the important facts that you need for your test.
That's an amazing advice because I totally agree with you that learning styles vary between people, and what might work for me, for example, let's say I love first aid, you might not like first aid and see yourself in a better book and actually understand and learn more from different books. So what I recommend is, if for example you try the book, start by reading that book, and if you don't think this is good for you, try something else. You don't have to finish the whole book if you don't think it's helping you to get the knowledge and the understanding.
Yeah, exactly, that's right.
So now, before I move on to discuss the first aid in details, when you were studying the Kaplan books, were you studying first aid at the same time, or you started first aid after you finish these books?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and actually it's a cycle. There is no right or wrong answer, because like learning, it's not like a linear process. Learning, it's by putting building blocks on top of each other. So initially I would go and read a topic from Kaplan, and then I understand this topic, and then I would go and read first aid and memorize the topic. In the next round I would memorize the topic again from first aid, but you will forget things, and you have to accept this reality. Forgetting, it's a huge big part of learning. Don't get frustrated, especially when it comes to microbiology, especially when it comes to biochemistry. You will forget a lot. That's totally fine. So if I find myself that I totally forgot the mechanism and how things are going on, especially like for DNA methylation, how like this the basic cellular things that are a bit difficult to memorize, so I would go back and read Kaplan. But if I found myself like I'm doing okay, like I understand what's going on there, I already have my knowledge, I know what they mean in the paragraph, I know what is the importance of each word in first aid. So that's when, if I'm going to repeat a topic, I would do more questions. That's the third level of using the knowledge.
Awesome. So you were reading first aid alongside with the books that you were preparing from.
Exactly. And I just want to like tell you like about how I approach learning. Okay, so like you can divide it to three blocks. The first block, it's understanding, it's the books. Go and use whichever books you want. The second block, it's memorizing. And for memorizing, first aid. The third block, it's using the information, and it's the question bank, which I'm going to talk about. So you can mix the first and second block together, which is like the big books at the first and until you feel comfortable memorizing. But this is not enough. You have to move on to the third block, which is like using the information.
Awesome, awesome. And then the first aid, after you went first round with the books, did you study first aid on its own? Were you studying by subject, or you studied the basic part first, like pharmacology, microbiology, and then you moved to the system like cardio, pulmonology, GI?
That's a really good question. So I would go system-wise. So like I would go like cardiology, I would do embryology, anatomy, physiology. If there's like biochemistry chapter or like a statin-related chapter, I would do that too. Then I would do the pharmacology of cardiology, and then like I would move on to the second and the third, and like risk, and then ID, then like so forth. So I would pick up a topic and I would try to understand, or I would pick up an organ. I would try to understand this organ starting from embryology and anatomy, and ending up with pathology.
And were you leaving notes from the books, for example, from Kaplan, if you found something interesting? Were you putting these notes over first aid, or you were just using the information in first aid?
This is very, very, very good question. So one of the things that I was frustrated about when I was like using the first aid is I used the paper version of first aid. Again, every person have their own style, but after like studying for a while, I noticed that my first aid is full of notes. And it was crazy. I needed a new first aid, but it was really wasteful of time just to go to buy another book and like take all your notes and make sure your new first aid's clean. Because if you have a clean book, like you will have more, like you have more appetite to study, you know? So I would recommend using an electronic version like PDF or like something electronic where you can add notes, and then like you can adjust the notes, you can add pictures, and then you can adjust them, because at the end, like this will change. At one point, it might be really like fascinating and like to you, and like you need to write everything related to the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. But after like maybe a month or two after doing many questions, like you would, oh, I don't need all these notes. So like, let's remove these notes and like, let's focus on something else. So it's like, again, so I would recommend using like the electronic version and adding notes, and accept that those notes will change with time, because like your knowledge will grow.
Definitely. And what you think is important also will change when you do a round of UWorld and when you do NBMEs. What you thought is high yield might not be as high yield, and what you thought as low yield might be actually important. So
exactly,
your evaluation of the information will change.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
And for those who like to use paper like me, you can use a pencil and you can take the notes as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So I want to take a little bit deep dive into your way of studying. So let's say you have a paragraph of biochemistry. Do you usually read that once, you understand it and go forward and then repeat, or you repeat it multiple times until you memorize it and move to the next one, then move to the next one?
Okay, so that's a good question. And like, I want to summarize. I just want to like, if you're going to try to become perfectionist in memorizing, you will need 10 years to write the step one. Never try to be perfect. Never try to be perfect in memorizing. Accept that you will forget. Accept that that's a reality, especially like if you read the first time, the cycle of like synthesizing purines, guanines, and like the DNA, and like if you want to like memorize that 100%, then doing questions, so this is waste of your time. I did that mistake. Like I was like fascinated about the cholesterol synthesis pathway and the different enzymes and the P450 and like how dehydroepiandrosterone, like I would draw, like I had a whiteboard and I would like draw this pathway again and again and again. It's useless. So read it once, do some questions, find your deficiencies. When you read once, you're not gonna memorize everything. You will have some deficiencies here and there, but you will not know those deficiencies until you do a diagnostic test, which is the question bank.
That's awesome. That's a great advice. Now, since you mentioned the diagnostic tests, which are the question banks, what are the question banks you recommend and how did you approach them?
All right. So when it comes to question banks, like doing questions, in my opinion, is the most important part in doing any USMLE and any Canadian exam. So just a bit about like my background. I'm doing my residency right now in Canada, and I did like the Canadian exams and the USMLE. So I did like many exams through the 2 years. So it's a skill. Writing a test, it's a skill. So when it comes to doing question banks, you always have the very well-known question bank, which is like the U word in the US. It's very well known, and you have to use this question bank for your USMLEs. You do it like once, twice, as much as you can, because like doing questions again and again and again and again, it's very important because this will grow in your brain like reflexes. Doing an exam is finding the right answer that the person who wrote the exam wants you to pick. So you will not develop this until you do hundreds of questions, and then you become like you develop that reflex. If you see a keyword, you're going to go and choose an answer. And that's how you're going to differentiate between like different diseases who have similar presentation. Let's say they might come and ask you about like approach, like give you a patient and they're asking about the cause of anemia, and he might have some CKD, some chronic disease, some rheumatologic disease, some risk factors for iron deficiency, and they give you one key that will help you to differentiate between those three entities, and you're just going to go and choose anemia of chronic disease versus iron deficiency anemia versus CKD. So regarding question banks, initially I would recommend the U word. Doing U word again and again and again until like you feel comfortable is very important. And then you can move on to other question banks.
Awesome. And you were mentioning about the brain reflexes, and that's extremely important skill that you need to acquire when you're studying for exams. But that will not come if you don't have the medical knowledge. So if you don't have the medical knowledge to know what the key for this answer is, you will not pick this key because you don't have the knowledge of the disease or the differential. So, and you need to develop that not only through the first aid, but through UL, because UL, and I want you to comment on that, they have amazing explanation after each answer. And I feel that some people mistakenly use UL as a way to assess their performance. I feel that it's more like a way to learn and study rather than assess your performance. What's your viewpoint on that?
So completely correct, and like I support you 100%. You were like they go and do like 40 questions and they get like X number wrong, and then they become frustrated. That's normal. That's totally normal. That's part of the learning curve. You're going to get a lot of wrong questions, and you have to learn. You have to study the question. Like I used to, if I have like the stem of the question, I used to write it on the whiteboard. I like to use whiteboard and illustrations. I would write the key words, and then I would try to memorize the key words in the question. And then I would go to the answers, A, B, C, D, E. A, why it is right, and B, why it is wrong. Because once you know why, example, like the choice B is wrong, in the exam, when choice B is the right one, you will know why it's the right one because you already memorized what are the key words for that answer. And so you have to learn the question, you have to learn the answers and the explanations and the educational objectives and you have to use it as a learning tool. It's not an assessment tool.
That's awesome. And another point is that sometimes you learn more from the wrong choices or the ones that are not correct more than the correct ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it can tell the difference between two very close answers, and by telling the difference, the explanation in the wrong area, in the wrong choice, it can help you differentiate the correct one in the real exam. So I totally recommend people to do UL early in their preparation, not in the last month, and use it as a way to learn and not only solve questions and go and see what the right answer. Read the explanation, understand, also read the wrong ones, why they are wrong, and then review it as you see appropriate.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So another question regarding the review of UL. UL is over 2,300 questions. how did you review did you review the whole the every question in UWorld, or you reviewed ones you highlighted, ones you flagged? How was your approach to reviewing this amazing question bank?
So what I did was like I solved like keyword twice, like doing questions was really important for me. So I didn't give a lot of time for like I read Kaplan books once and that's it. And then I did like first aid U word, first aid U word, first aid U word, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because like now U word, it's going to be your building block to understand first aid. But doing first aid U word directly without going through the books, I felt was almost impossible and a bit frustrating. So I use like Kaplan or like whatever book, I understand first aid, then I would go and build the knowledge from first aid, understand U word, rebuild the knowledge from first aid, do U word again, understand U word. And like I would go through that cycle again and again and again. So I did U word twice. And then I also used Anki flashcards, which I believe it's one of the best learning tools if you have time. So I would write, and when you build questions in Anki, it's very important to be mindful that your answers are not like the length is not a paragraph. It should be short and concise and contain the keywords that you want to memorize. So I would do Anki a lot, and Anki contained the high yield things that I felt that they are deficient in my knowledge, and I want to make sure I memorize them.
So when you reviewed UWorld, you reviewed the whole question bank. You didn't review
Yeah,
specific questions, but you took some notes through the Anki flashcards.
exactly. Yeah.
And
That
did you
helped me when the exam like when I approached when I had like a short time before the exam, so I reviewed the Ankis.
so you reviewed the Ankis rather than the whole
Yeah,
20 over
exactly.
2400 questions. And again, this is similar to the Kaplan book notes on first aid. Did you take notes from UWorld on first aid?
So that's why I recommended the electronic first aid, because after doing UWorld, you will realize that a lot of notes that you took like are low yield, and now you want to take the high yield notes from first aid, because like before the exam, you can read first aid, but you can't do the entire UWorld.
Definitely, especially that because first aid is a book, you can go to specific section and look for that. But
Exactly.
New
Yeah.
World, it's the questions are not ordered in a specific disease pattern, so it's easier to find an answer in first aid rather than just scroll through the hundreds and hundreds of questions in
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
World.
Exactly.
Just a point for those who are not familiar with first aid. First aid does not contain explanation. So if you start with first aid, it might be hard in the beginning to understand, but on the other side, UWorld has the explanation. So if it's your first time reading a question, you might be able to understand the answer and what's the problem from UWorld, while that is not possible in first aid if you haven't read the books. So this is just for those who are planning to start directly with first aid or UWorld. I recommend starting with UWorld compared to first aid, because first aid doesn't have that much explanation. What do you think, Roupen, for those who don't have enough time to go through the Kaplan books?
Well, like if that's the situation, you can skip Kaplan books. You can go first aid, UWorld. If you have time at night, videos, podcasts, videos, podcasts, because like use whatever tool you want to understand first aid. If you're driving, you can use like podcasts, you can watch videos, you can turn the videos to MP3s and you can hear them, and like you need to memorize first aid. There are many people who wrote the exam. I'm a bit systematic, I'm a bit OCD, but there are many people who scored really high and they did the first aid that UWorld only, and that worked for them. So you have to figure out if like doing first aid and UWorld works for you, go for it. There is no right or wrong answer here.
Awesome. So now after we covered the first aid, the Kaplan books, the UWorld, and as we mentioned that UWorld is not an assessment exam, what are the exams or the question tests that you use to assess your performance and if you're close to going for the exam or delaying it?
Yeah, so I mainly use, I believe, like everyone does, like the NBMEs. I use the UWorld self-assessments, which were really good. So those are like the main resources for self-assessment. UWorld self-assessment, NBMEs. Um, so there are many NBMEs there. You can buy them. You can sometimes find them online here and there. Like I use the NBMEs, and again, if I got something wrong in NBMEs, don't let that cause frustration. Use it again as a learning tool. The real exam is the exam that you write in the prometric center. Otherwise, everything you do, it's learning. Everything you do before one day of the exam is still learning. So I use the NBMEs as assessment tool and as learning tool. And I use the your self-assessment as assessment tool and as learning tool. And I did those like before a month of the exam, I believe. And yeah, so those are my main assessment resources.
So when do you recommend starting with these? I know some people can start one to just to assess where they are, and as they advance in their studying, they do more. When do you think is the appropriate time to start doing the NBMEs or the UL self-assessment?
It really depends on your time. Like if you have a good, like if you have enough time, like you can start them early in your preparation, and like every month you can do one, every week you can do one. If you are short of time, make sure around like after finishing 50% of your plan, do one, and then after finishing like 75% of your plan, do another one. After finishing 80% of your plan, do another one. So it really depends on your timeline. And you have to be mindful how much time you are putting for the exam.
And when you're doing these assessment tools, generally they are 4 hours and the exam is 7. So do you do two in the same day, or
Yeah,
you
sure. I would
just
do back to back. Yeah,
so you do two to simulate the exam?
exactly. Especially when the exam, because like you need to build that stamina. The exam is all about the endurance. The exam is about reflexes and for how long you can use the reflexes for 8 hours. Like they need you to use those reflexes for 8 hours and be like able to answer the questions for a long period of time.
Awesome. So you studied the first Kaplan books, first aid, UWorld. Can you tell us a little bit about the preparation strategies 1 month before the exam or the final weeks? How did they differ, and what you were focusing on during the last days and last weeks?
Yeah. So before the exam, the most important thing is to do the right and sorry, the high yields. The high yields are first aid, UWorld, first aid, UWorld. I would go again and again and again, first aid and UWorld, first aid. I would go like choose a topic, and then like I would be systematic. Like I'm going to do today cardiology, tomorrow I'm going to do rest, afterwards I'm going to do ID, afterwards I'm going to do refto, and that day I would like do questions first because I already have the knowledge and assess my deficiencies, and then I go and review first aid. Do the questions first because again I already have the knowledge, and then I go and do the first aid.
And after you arrive to the day before the exam, any strategies on how to deal with the stress of the day of the exam, sleeping, eating, going out? Can you tell us a little bit about what you did one day before the exam?
Oh, that's a really good one. So that's why I recommended initially doing 8 hour self-assessment test. So that's when you're going to figure out what works for you. So for me, what works is like I had snacks on the day of the exam, bananas, granola bars, peak bars. Those help me to go carbs help me to go through the stress of the exam. I ate a lot of carbs during the exam too. And I knew that would help me because like I did many sim tests before the real test. The day before, I would just go and relax, especially if you prepared well and for a period of time. Because like the day before you're stressed, if you learn something, it might stick, it might not. And I was in a point like, I'm just like, I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna give my brain a break because like the second day you have a war that's gonna last for 8 hours and you have to survive that war.
Any tips on sleeping aids?
So sleeping aids, like try not to think about the exam. Try to the same day, like take walks, exercise early in the morning. Don't drink coffee if you are a coffee drinker the entire day. Don't drink coffee, okay? And like the night before, try to watch a movie to take you out of the exam. Try to several hours before going to bed, dim the lights. Don't stay away from your mobile phone. Ask your like families and the loved one not to call you because like you're not gonna get, you don't want to hear any bad news. You don't want to hear anyone like nagging, complaining. You just want to be in a peaceful situation, watch a comedy movie, try to relax, drink some like hot beverages, and try to go to bed. If you can early, that's good. But if you can, just go at the regular time. Go if you sleep at 11, don't go to bed at 6 because like it's not gonna work.
Yeah. So relax, get some sleep, don't try something new. So if you want to try something,
Exactly.
try it on the simulation exam that you've done before and see if it works. You can do it, but if not, don't try something new on the day of the exam.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
During the exam, it's a long exam. What was the main thing that helped you stay focused for the 8 hour, 7 hour exam and 1 hour break? How did you deal with questions that were hard or you didn't know the answer to?
So one of the most important things is you do a question, either you know it or you don't know. If you don't know, choose the best answer, go with your gut. You sometimes your first answer is the right answer. Don't change your answer. Why? I don't know. It's just like that. For some reason, your brain knows to how to pick. And then when you overthink about it, you're going to make wrong choices. And then you move on. You mark questions as you go. At the end of the block, if you have some time to review those mark one, go for it. Don't change them unless you are 100% sure that you missed a keyword. Otherwise, if you don't know what happened, just go with your hunch. In your break, go out and don't think about the things that you did not answer, or like if there were many questions you were not sure, because this will affect your second block. And if your second block have some question you're not sure, this will affect your third block. So every block, it's a new block. Every block, it's a new day. Like it's like that. Between the blocks, something that I really find that helps me is sitting there for a 60 minutes without moving, where I would become like sleepy and tired. So I would just go to the washroom, wash my face, drink some coffee, jump there, like do 10 squats or something, just like to move the blood in my body and like to make sure my brain has enough circulation. And I'm motivated to go to the next block. I would forget everything, suppress the memory, suppress the questions, and then go on and move to the next block. And how you would time your you like take 5 minutes or 6 minutes, it's something that you will know by yourself when you do the long sim tests.
Yeah, so you were taking a break after each single block to
Yes,
move and get out of the exam mood and then come back with a fresh start.
exactly. Wash my face, have some coffee, bite some jumps, and then go and do the next block.
And you mentioned the great advice not to focus on a question that you were not sure about, because first you might have answered that question correct and you don't need to think about it anymore.
Yeah,
And in the case that it was wrong, you don't want that one wrong answer to affect a whole block or the rest of your exam,
exactly.
and change the outcome of your exam because of one single question.
That's right. And believe me, after the exam, you will have a whole month to think about all the wrong questions. So don't do that between your breaks. Please don't do it.
After your exam, you're done. Now the memory starts for all the questions that you got during the exam. What was your strategy of dealing with this? Were you looking at the answers? Were you trying to
Well,
suppress that temptation?
it depends on your personality. If you want to beat yourself up, go for it. Otherwise, like, don't do it. Don't do it. It's because like you're not gonna change. You might feel like you really like after my step two exam, like the whole month was one of the worst months in my life. I've been in situations where it's out of the scope of this video, but I've been in really scary situation in my life. I never had PTSD, but going through the step two like caused me PTSD for a month. But like I ended up getting like a really high mark. So please don't stress out. Don't beat yourself. Your brain already helped you to go through one of the hardest exams in the world. Try to relax, try to enjoy. Whenever you have a memory, suppress it. Watch movies, watch Netflix, enjoy your life, do anything you want, start a new hobby. Don't look at the answers. Don't beat yourself up. You did well, you did your best, and just wait for the results.
And as you mentioned, this will not change the outcome of the exam, so
Exactly.
there is no need for it. So finally, do you have any final thoughts on or advice for those preparing for the step one exam, trying to study or in the final days of their exam?
Yeah, my main advice would be questions, questions, questions. Writing an exam, it's a skill. And you will not develop this skill until you develop the ability to find the keywords and until you know what the person who wrote the question wants you to pick. And this comes with experience and doing hundreds and even thousands of questions. So questions, questions, questions. It's a skill. Because like now I'm doing my residency. Medicine in real life is different from exam. There are no keywords. There are no triggers. There are no reflexes. And it's different. So if you well clinically, that doesn't mean that you're going to score high on your exam. And if you score high on your exam, that doesn't mean you're going to be well clinically or very good physician clinically. So writing an exam is a skill. Practicing medicine is another skill. To score high, you need to do questions as much as you can. That would be my single advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roupen. That was extremely helpful.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And for our viewers, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and see you in future videos.